And the Oscar for Best Leading Actress goes to Chorizo Chugger. Me? Oh my, thank you. Stop, thank you. Ay, a ver, espérame tantito, es que traigo a ver, viejo, aguas, ahí te va el chicle, cáchalo. Sorry. Oh my God, what? Gosh, people nowadays are so sensitive. If the 97th Oscar ceremony taught us anything, is that the industry is in shambles right now, desperately trying to get their hands on anything they can to make money. And that's not to say that every single film that came out this year was garbage. 2024 actually had some bangers. It was, in my opinion, a good year for the horror genre. And it also had some films that were mid, yes, but that brought something new to the table, felt creative. However, the reason why a lot of us were disappointed this year and why we don't feel hopeful for the future is because the bad movies were extremely bad. And this was made worse by the fact that film critics really try to gaslight us into believing that these mediocre films were Oscar worthy. I mean, we really saw it all this year. From movies that used AI to fake accents to films that felt like they were written by AI. And although this is something that has been happening for a while now, and although there isn't a catalyst, a Franz Ferdinand, if you will, to this conflict, there are a couple of reasons as to why the film industry has felt so shitty recently. Vale, mariachi! It is often said that streaming services have hurt Hollywood's profits by contributing to the decrease in theater attendance. However, after a lot of extensive research, reading only the most professional, peer-reviewed articles, I've come to the conclusion that the math isn't mathing. Streaming services really haven't impacted theater attendance that much to a point where it matters. And at the end of the day, ticket prices, concession stand prices, and the aftermath of the pandemic probably hurt theater attendance way more than any streaming service out there. The real issue here is residuals. Now, these are payments made to the artists and or the people who own the license of a product for the ongoing use of said product. And that's all good, that's all fair. The problem is that residuals on average, even for popular movies, don't tend to be high, at least not high enough to pay the wage of every single person involved in the movie, right? Because filmmaking takes a lot of staff. But now let's take into consideration those films that, regardless of their quality, for whatever reason, might not have been popular with the audience. That's going to affect how much a streaming service will be willing to pay for it, if at all. And that would be fine if films had other ways to make that money, but they really don't. In an interview with The Hot Ones, yes, the chicken wings YouTube channel, Matt Damon explains how DVDs were their safety net. Regardless of critics' opinions on the movie or attendance upon the film's release, there was always the chance that throughout the years the movie would cement itself as a public favorite and would continue to make revenue for many years to come. That was the case for movies such as Treasure Planet, The Iron Giant, Donnie Darko, Idiocracy, 28 Days, and many more. But with streaming services, this just isn't the case anymore. If a movie doesn't do well during its box office era, then that's it. And that's why a lot of these film studios just simply don't want to take the risk anymore. As Reddit user Pellbutton4370 states, no studio is going to finance a niche film anymore when the return on box office would be so low relative to a superhero movie or something like that. Now, this isn't an excuse, it's just an explanation, and there are ways that executives could circumvent this problem. For example, keeping production costs low by using practical effects rather than relying on CGI, or choosing unknown actors instead of paying these huge amounts to A-list celebrities who aren't really even that good to begin with. But unfortunately, not everyone that's in Hollywood is in it for the love of filmmaking. A lot of them are just there for the money. It's just more comfortable for them to repeat the patterns, especially when we take into consideration that streaming services don't really care about the quality, they care about the quantity. They need the illusion of choices to keep us subscribed. And so they could really care less if the newest superhero movie has a 23% on IMDb. They know that there's people that are gonna fall for it. I've fallen for it because it's easy to think, oh, you only pay $12.99 a month and you get all of these new releases. Never mind that they're only there for a month or 2 weeks before they take them off, or that they only have part 2 of the 7-part series. You know, you kind of trick yourself into thinking, well, they have the newest releases. It doesn't matter that they're not good movies or that I am not gonna watch them. They're there, so it's worth my money. So the writer's strike happened from May 2nd to September 27th of 2023. And there's a lot of reasons behind it, a lot of context. But the two major things that seem to be at the forefront of the strike and that actually concern this video were AI use and residuals, like we already talked about. So as you can see, the strike did end and an agreement was reached. However, those 5 months had a huge financial impact on the film industry. Studios were just desperate to get people back in the office. But ever since then, I've had the feeling that Hollywood executives hold some sort of animosity towards their employees. It's just that with the Academy nominating and awarding films that are believed to have been made with AI, allegedly, it just feels like they were trying to send a message. Like it was a reminder to everyone that they are the ones with the power, and that while AI technology might not be that good right now, that one day it will be. It's like they're pushing the boundaries to see what they can get away with and if we will even notice. So even though the strike ended in 2023, I believe this conflict is far away from being over and will only continue to get worse, unfortunately. But I'm just a mere chorizo that's chronically online, so instead of trying to dive into the world of film writers and AI development, let me stick to what I do best, which is complaining. So we've already talked about films that are considered bad because they have awkward dialogues, incongruent storytelling, or bad visuals. But what about the uniformity that we've been seeing in films recently? This sort of homogenization, where all comedy films use the same jokes, the same humor, the same delivery, and all horror films have the same plot and use the same jump scare techniques. I believe this lack of creativity, this lack of diversity comes from monopolization. And I'm not just throwing fancy words that I can't pronounce out there just to prove a point. But I mean, if you own or are associated with all of your competitors, then what's the incentive to be better? If you are making money from the films that your competitors are creating, then you don't really fear failure, because who will people turn to for entertainment if not you? Oh, that film studio over there? Yeah, I own it. Oh, that other one? Yeah, we're partners. You have the same people working on different franchises across different genres, and so everything just kind of starts to feel the same. There's this lack of style, of vision, personality, things that differentiate you from other movies being made in the same genre. Take this review of Star Trek Section 31, for example. Here, Mr. Jeremy Murphy tells us, Section 31 was a storyline pregnant with possibility, led by an actress and character who were made for each other. What happened? Someone had the unusual idea of channeling the Marvel franchise. Someone else then suggested taking the skeletal outlines of Marvel characters and fleshing them out with Ham. Now, in all honesty, I haven't seen this movie because I'm not a big fan of the Star Trek universe, but just looking at the posters, I can tell that Mr. Jeremy Murphy is right on the money with this one. And this is a sentiment that's shared by a lot of people regarding a lot of other franchises. Because after Disney acquired Marvel and went on to find success with the Avengers franchise, it kind of became the trend to follow for other film studios. For example, recently Blumhouse had a partial merge with Jason Wan's Atomic Monster, and both of them are film studios that focus on the horror genre. However, Jason Wan is the creator of the Conjuring universe, and so he has like his particular formula, his particular style. And although some people have their issues with the Conjuring universe, they did in fact go on to be very successful, very recognizable. In fact, I didn't really have an issue with them until the Blumhouse merged happened, and then ever since then, every Blumhouse film that I have seen has that stupid Conjuring formula, and it bothers me so much. But at the same time, how can we sit here and blame these smaller companies for merging or for selling out to the bigger fish when they're competing with film studios that have acquired successful, recognizable IPs, have their own big selection of remakes and reboots to make, and even have their own streaming platform? So I think we can all agree that remakes and reboots are nothing but stinky cash grabs, and that it's really harmful not just for the film industry itself, the competitors, but also for the audience. We're all bored of them, we all roll our eyes whenever we see the newest trailer for the newest remake, and we're all sitting here asking ourselves why studios keep putting out remakes and reboots when they know that we don't want them. Or do we? Okay, so let's talk numbers. Yes, the chorizo who couldn't get anything above a C- in integrated math 1 is gonna talk to you about statistics. It's totally not because I want to show you my chart that I made in Google Sheets. But anyways, upon doing some research, I discovered that in order for a movie to be considered profitable, it needs to make 3 times the production budget. Now, there was some debate online about which method was better. Some people were saying that it's actually 2.5 times as much as the production budget. Other people were suggesting the 50-40-25 method. But for the sake of this video, and because I don't think that I have the brain to be able to calculate all of that, we're just gonna stick to 3 times. So this is the chart that I came up with. First, we have the name of the films, then we have the estimated budget. Next, we have the amount of money that the film is supposed to make in order to cover the cost of production, including marketing, which would be budget times 3. And finally, we have the amount of money that the film actually made during its time at the box office. Obviously, this chart is very primitive and it doesn't cover every single remake ever made, but I do believe it helps us see some trends, and more importantly, the reason why film studios choose remakes and reboots over original storylines. So for example, both of the remakes that we see here for the year of 2019 went on to make billions of dollars, surpassing their initial goal by a big margin. And it makes sense because at this point in time, remakes were in their infancy. They were a novelty, so everybody and their grandma were running to buy a ticket. And more importantly, Disney still wasn't sure if this whole remake strategy was gonna work for them, so they were obviously putting a lot of effort to deliver a quality film. But then 2020 and 2021 came around and shit hit the fan because nobody really knew how long all of this was going to last. And as 2021 rolled around and certain states started lifting their mandates, we saw some films get luckier than others. And this provided the perfect excuse for movies such as Mulan, who despite the situation would have ended up as commercial failures all the same. So instead of realizing that the problem with the film was the film itself, Disney decided to hold on to the belief that the straight-to-streaming service release was the cause for the flop. And I guess this idea was reinforced when they saw films such as Cruella and Candyman, who were commercially successful at a time of economic uncertainty. And I know you might be thinking, wait, didn't Cruella actually underperform? And you're absolutely right. However, Disney has claimed that Cruella managed to make the rest of the money back through their streaming service. And I am inclined to believe this, seeing as how Cruella 2 is currently being filmed. And what happens during 2022 and 2023 is actually really interesting, because while we see Disney hit this flop era, other studios start taking the lead, proving that audiences don't mind studios profiting from nostalgia as long as the quality is average. The perfect example of this being Pinocchio, who went on to be such a huge flop that I couldn't really even find the actual amount of money that it made at the box office, with some sources claiming that it made as little as $33,000. But the problem wasn't that people didn't want to see the Pinocchio story remade for modern audiences. The problem was the reliance of CGI and the fact that somebody else made it better. And it shows because Wonka and Mean Girls had nothing going for them. Yes, they're both based on popular IPs, but nobody was really sitting there saying, oh man, I really wish someone would remake Mean Girls. I really wish someone would make Wonka for the third time. And let's take into consideration that both of these films were musicals, which is already not something that's very popular with the majority of the audience. And they still went on to do pretty well. And I think this is when Disney finally got the message, when the gears actually started turning, because they decided to come back with Lion King Mufasa, which honestly is just the lowest of the low, because when you really think about it, this is a prequel to the remake. But it still did really well, and even though this came out before Snow White, it almost felt like a cushion because they knew that Snow White would flop. I mean, this movie at one point was supposed to be cancelled, like Disney was not gonna release it, and it still made $205 million. So as much as we like to sit here and claim that we're tired of remakes, that we don't want to see them anymore, the numbers prove differently, because Lilo and Stitch just came out. In fact, at the time that I'm making this video, Lilo and Stitch is still in theaters, and it's so close to making 3 times as much as the original 3 times that it was supposed to make. So not only are remakes profitable, there's clearly a market for it. Out of the 13 remakes that are in this chart, only 3 of them ended up being commercial failures, which brings me to my next point, unfortunately. Vale, mariachi! I want to start off this section by reading you another quote. This is from Moviegoer Extraordinaire. I believe that this is his blog post, and it goes a little like this. He says that the people up top are listening to us at least a tiny bit, and then are making ill-informed decisions based on our reactions to them. So when we go to see every latest Marvel release in history, even if it's a bad movie, by us going to watch these movies, the message Hollywood is seeing is, look, there's so many people watching, they must like it. And when it comes to newer, more original movies, they aren't watched as often or given the time of day. And because of this, execs are deciding not to make newer, more original movies. End quote. And look, I don't want to come on here and sound like a 2020 Are We the Virus post, because we are not the root of the problem. But as consumers, we have contributed to it. I think a lot of us have this tendency to believe in an ideal world where studios and executives don't need to be pressured into doing the right thing. It's easy for us to say, well, if they started the problem, they should fix it. But that's never going to happen, because as long as their films keep making a profit, no matter how minimal it is, it's still going to be a win in their book. And so it doesn't matter to them if the film has 2 stars or if all of the reviews for it are bad. At the end of the day, as long as the money is still coming in, they'll continue to follow the same formula. And although I do like the quote that I read to you in the beginning, the only thing that I don't agree with is this idea that there's some sort of miscommunication between Hollywood and us. I think Hollywood executives are very aware of what they're doing. So it's not that they're out of touch, it's not that they're stupid, it's not that they don't understand internet culture. It's just that they will literally take any opportunity they can get to make money, even if it means humiliating themselves and their art. And so therefore, you can hate watch a film. You can leave a strongly worded 0 stars review. You can mock the film, the actors, the writers, the producers on TikTok. But the only thing that will ever truly get under their skin is you admitting that you did not pay for a movie ticket, that you watched this movie in one of those 123 ABC websites. Let's make something clear. Mocking the film didn't get us the good Sonic. People threatening to boycott the movie got us the good Sonic. Con dinero baila el perro, and that's why the Morbius team decided to re-release the movie after the whole It's Morbin time trend. That's also why Jack Audiard, or whatever his French name is, quien por cierto me la pela, said that he didn't really care what people thought about his film because at the end of the day, it accomplished what he wanted, which was people talking about it. And as much as I hate him, he's absolutely right. I had to watch it on a streaming service so that I could talk about it on YouTube, which at the end of the day is still revenue for him. And so taking all of that into consideration, I had a very hard time putting together this section without feeling hypocritical. Because not only am I a consumer, but I'm also someone who's trying to build a YouTube channel that focuses on reviewing films. But ultimately, I don't think the solution is boycotting. I just think we need more discernment. Because watching a remake every once in a while or enjoying a couple of Marvel movies doesn't make you a bad person. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Before the Mean Girls remake came out, I saw a lot of people online saying that it shouldn't have been made because it would never live up to the original anyways. Which, okay, valid criticism, but then when they went to see the movie, they complained that it didn't live up to the original. Like, yeah, no shit. Why would you even go watch it and contribute to its box office earning when you had already made up your mind about it and you weren't gonna give it a fair chance? Or another example. I've seen many YouTubers that don't like Marvel movies and that absolutely hate the Marvel formula. And I see you, I agree with you. But then if you already know and understand your issues with those types of films, why do you continue to review every single one that comes out? And this isn't about not criticizing films or not being able to compare the original to the remake. This is about people who know that their opinion on a film, on a franchise, on a brand isn't going to change, but they continue to contribute to the property's income just for the hype or the FOMO. In my opinion, that's when all of this becomes problematic. But another issue that we also seem to have is the inability to critique in constructive ways. I think we have a hard time understanding that there's a difference between a bad movie and a problematic one. A bad film is one that was just a little mediocre, whose writing was maybe not up to our standard, whose acting was a little off, or whose biggest problem is that it's just boring. But a problematic one is one that beyond its quality, there's something about it that's sending a wrong message. So for example, movies that are made with AI, productions that were unsafe and caused people on set to be hurt, films that are romanticizing, normalizing ideas that are harmful to actual people. And so it's completely okay to criticize a bad film, to sit there, dissect it, and say, these are all the things wrong with this film and the reasons why I didn't like it. But to go through the effort of boycotting it, of trying to cancel the actors, the producers, simply because you thought it was average, because you thought it was mediocre, and not because it's actually problematic, is a tiny part of the reason why we always get the same outline, the same character development, the same endings. Take Joker 2 and Emilia Perez for example. There's a lot of things that could be said about Joker 2, like the fact that there wasn't a need for a sequel, the fact that they chose to make it a musical, the fact that they chose to make it a jazz musical, or that some people didn't enjoy Lady Gaga's performance. But at the end of the day, its biggest sin was being average, boring. And yet, look at all of the backlash that it got. Not only did it flop, but it even went on to affect Lady Gaga's musical career. And compare that to the reception that Emilia Perez got, where there were so many people defending it, so many people giving it the benefit of the doubt. Even though that aside from being a boring movie, it was problematic. It had plenty of AI allegations. And despite the criticism that a lot of the actors faced, Zoe Saldana went on to win an Oscar award, and Selena Gomez's career wasn't affected at all. If anything, she gained more popularity from it. And there's plenty of other examples that we could get into, but the point is, as consumers, we hold a lot of power, and the films that we decide to support, especially financially, dictate the films that will be made in the future. So if we really are tired of remakes, we need to decrease our consumption of them. If we really want more indie original films, we need to support and highlight them. If we want to see different faces on screen, we need to judge them fairly and give them opportunities to improve. And if you like wasting your time, you should subscribe to my channel. So yeah, moral of the story, stop paying for streaming services and buy DVDs. Bye!